things need to be discussed that we cannot hear behind a mask. So.
All right, so I'm out here with Jodie Sweetin, and I want to say thanks for coming on the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Absolutely. I have been following along with you guys over the past few months and what your mission is, and I'm really committed to what you guys stand for and, creating awareness and educating people. So thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to sit and chat politics with you.
And that's actually exactly what we were doing. We just finished filming. You did a very powerful reading of the call for the protest on September 5th from Refuse Fascism.
Yes.
And we were sitting having some conversation off of that and thought, man, we should film this. And so we're doing the interview.
Yes.
And so I wanted to start by just asking you why you decided to join with this effort from Refuse Fascism, and what you thought, what stood out to you the most, what you think is most needs to sink in with people about this call for protests on September 5th to demand Trump Pence out now.
Well, I know that the reason that I really have felt myself so aligned with the movement of RevComs and Refuse Fascism was because it was exactly what I have been saying since Trump began running for office, which was this is a dangerous slide into fascism, without use of hyperbole, of actual fascist, open dictatorship in America. And what frightened me is how many people were completely in denial of that. And so throughout the time of, his first election and, since then, the 3 years and 9 months or so it's been since then, just the repeated chipping away of the institutions that we have come to know as so American. And some of them need to go. A lot of them need to go. We need to have a completely restructured system. But watching them be dismantled in front of our eyes with so many people purposefully staying blind to it has been terrifying. And so over these past few months, I've become much more active, out in the streets with Black Lives Matter, with Refuse Fascism. And I just really hope that people will start listening and educating themselves. We are not screaming fascism because we're trying to be extreme. We're screaming it because it's happening. And, that should scare everyone.
You were talking earlier about some of the particular features of this, even going back to Trump campaigning and getting people to chant "lock her up." What does it mean that he's threatening his opponent this way? You were talking about the rule of law and the restructuring of that, or norms. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be helpful, as you understand it, how do you see this fascism advancing? What are the things you think people need to start identifying in a different way than they have?
I think, Sunsara and I were talking earlier that when people started decrying fascism, I think a lot of, even those on the left, felt that it was too strong a word, felt that it was not, that we were comparing him to Hitler and to the Nazis. And I think what those of us on the left were really trying to say is that Hitler and the Nazis started just like this. It started with small things and getting rid of the normal rule of law. I mean, every day we wake up to a president who tweets some of the most untrue, horrific, absurd, violent, demeaning things. And we've come to accept that. And in doing so, he has allowed the systems that we have relied upon of democracy and fairness and justice, and he's shredded them. He's shredded them before our eyes, and he continues to do it, and we continue to allow it. I mean, the court system alone should, what was done with the Supreme Courts with Mitch McConnell even before Trump left office, like that, those things are signs of impending fascism. When you start messing with the courts and not, calling witnesses to an impeachment trial. My God, we had an impeachment of a president where no one said anything. We weren't allowed to look at information. That, for me, was, I couldn't understand why everyone wasn't jumping up and down in the streets and saying, no, we refuse to accept this. We refuse. I think people were like, oh, this is crazy. But there was nothing after that. And so they have been slowly turning up the volume on dismantling our courts, sending in, federal troops, unnamed, unidentified. They have been taking people from the streets who are protesting. They're trying to get them to give up their First Amendment rights, that they will release them, but they can't protest any further. Things like that are such infringements on the things that we have said are American ideals. Where are we standing up for that now? Like, where are the things that we have held so dear, and we're just allowing them to be ripped from our hands, is what I see what's going on right now.
So, Refuse Fascism has called for these protests September 5th. What would you like to see that day across this country, and what difference do you think it would make and can make for people to actually stand up and raise the demand, Trump, Pence out now? I think people need a vision of what's possible.
I think that, as we've talked about before, people rely heavily on the election. But I think that the moment that we started discussing, and this has been being discussed for a while, the moment we started discussing, what if the election doesn't happen? What if the election, what if he delegitimizes the election? I think the moment we even started having those thoughts as possibilities is the moment that we have to demand them out now. Because the moment that we start having those discussions means that the moment is here that we think it's even possible. And if we think it, so do they. So, I think what I would love to see on September 5th is that those people who have been saying that, Trump needs to go and we're waiting for the election, I think what we have to understand is that this election depends not just on the ballots that are sent in on Election Day, on November 3rd. This election depends on the movement and the swell and the momentum that we have from now until that day to continue sustained mass protest across the board, not just the people that have been out in the streets protesting for the last couple of months, but the people who are really becoming more and more aware of sort of the subtle web of, it's not even subtle anymore, a web of fascism that is infiltrating all of our American systems of government and justice. And once we stand up as people, the reason that we've always said that, power to the people and that the people have the majority of the voice is because we do. The more of us that stand up and don't just wring our hands at home or write an ugly Facebook post, that actually get out in the streets and say, I will not accept this. This is not the America that I stand for. It requires action. It cannot come from sitting idly by. There is nothing that power fears more than people joined together. And I think we need to remind people of that we greatly outnumber, and our passion has to stand for something. And we have to stand against this out in the streets, with our voices, with our bodies, with our, we have to be out there. It's really hard for a regime to be overthrown and to leave if everyone's sitting at home. And I know that nobody wants to go out during all of this right now, but my question is what are people willing to accept and become? And we've talked about this. What atrocities are you willing to see on the news and to see on Facebook and to see in your Instagram feed? What things are you comfortable seeing day in and day out before you do something? What does it take? We're already there. We've been in the streets protesting the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all of these people, but we need to remind ourselves that the ultimate goal is that this regime that is behind all of that and pushing all of that forward has to go, and it has to go now. Because by the time we get to January of next year and, our election has happened, it's too late. It's too late. This isn't for fun. We're not playing. This is the definite future of our country, of humanity, and of our world is at stake. It's not, I don't think we can fully wrap our minds quite around just what is at stake at this election. And if we begin to rest on our laurels, then nothing's going to change except for the worse.
Well, I think that's extremely important, and I want people to really take in what you just said and sit with it and hold yourself accountable to what time it is and what our responsibility in this moment is. All right, well, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Absolutely, my pleasure, always.